We know that kindness buffers stress. We know that, kindness helps people live longer in all these different areas of our lives, and being kind to ourselves is also a big part of that.
This is The Fit Mess with Zach and Jeremy.
Hello and welcome to The Fit Mess. I am Jeremy, along with my co-host Zach.
What's up, everyone?
Happy New Year. Hope the celebrations and the holiday season were good to you, and you're ready to take on whatever challenges this crazy year and decade have in store for us. Our guest this week is Dr. Kelli Harding. She's the author of The Rabbit Effect, and we'll get into how her book basically breaks down how kindness is such a major contributor to not only your mental health, but your physical health. It's a fascinating conversation, a fascinating book. We'll get into that in just a little bit. But here we are, New Year's. I don't know. Are you much of a resolution guy, Zach?
Not really. I think I used to be, and realized that every time I did, I just by Valentine's Day, whatever I resolved to do was gone.
Yeah.
Mostly because it was something large and unobtainable, like, at the time, not working out at all, and then saying, I'm going to work out 7 days a week.
Right.
You can't do it. Like, so from a resolution standpoint, I have a couple of small things that I want to implement this year, but, it's nothing really large, nothing daunting, because that's where I fail. Yeah,
I know in my case, the idea of a resolution always fails because I'm doing it at an arbitrary time. It's the calendar changes, so that's the day that there's going to be some major change. And I know that every time I've had any successful change or successfully accomplished a goal, it's been because I was just ready to do it, and I was ready to do it now. It wasn't, I'll put this off until Wednesday at midnight, and then, boy, things are going to be different, because they're not. You're still the same person living the same life until you make that mental switch that says, okay, that's enough of that. Let's do this different. So with that in mind, I've kind of been taking stock of this last year, 2019, and I don't know about coming up short or failures, but going into this year, I was very heavily motivated to drop some weight, get in physical shape, just take better care of myself physically. And along the way, I ended up going on this retreat for a weekend that really focused on doing a lot of like inner work, really working on sort of a spiritual or mental health sort of project. And it was really profound. I've talked about it a few times on this show, and it made a big difference in sort of the way I lived. And while a lot of that has faded, I still remember coming away from that. I just had this much more positive outlook. I felt really confident in myself. I believed that I had finally sort of become the person I was always meant to be. And again, that has sort of faded as life grinds you down and you sort of get back into normal. So I don't know that this is a resolution, but I know that so much of my work going into this year was focused on physical fitness. I want to focus more in the next year on sort of my spiritual or emotional fitness, because I know that only bleeds out into what my physical fitness is. I know that it has an effect on my body and can help me to be a healthier person inside and out.
Yeah, it's better. I don't know. I feel like a resolution is trying to do one or two things differently, but having that goal or viewpoint of where you want to be at the end of next year, I think that's more important.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me this year, though, is really just going to be a focus on making sure that my body is operating at peak performance, and that's not just working out. That's feeding it healthy, and I tend to stress eat, so
let's talk about that for a minute, because the holidays just ended, and I ate like a dumpster fire. I mean, just it was ridiculous. I think after Thanksgiving, I sort of had this, I'm going to stay clean till Christmas, because then the parties, it'll be, too much of a challenge, and, give yourself a break, yada, yada. That lasted like a week, and I went pretty hard, working out every day and all that. But the food, I am powerless when I'm surrounded by crap food. And then add to it the stress of just, life projects and holidays and just the day to day. And I just collapsed. And especially sort of getting through the holidays and the leftovers of after hosting parties and stuff, I was literally just eating pieces of pie to get them out of the house.
Uh-huh.
Like,
yep,
I could have thrown them away. That would have been the responsible, healthy thing to do. But part of me was like, just go. You're already a mess. The train's already left the station. Just park it and be done. Get this stuff out of the house. And then, again, the arbitrary New Year's, once the holidays have ended, a lot of that stress goes away. And so does the temptation of the parties and the food that's out and all that. But oh my God, there was a day where I think I only ate baked goods.
Yep. I had a couple of days like that too. It was the cookie day. Oh
Yeah.
my God. And the fact that New Year's Eve was on a Wednesday this year was even worse because my whole thought process, whenever I start something new, I tend to start it on a Monday.
Sure. Cause you start the routine of the week and all that.
Yeah. Or I'm sorry, New Year's Day was on a Wednesday. So, I was talking myself out of all of my New Year's stuff and saying, "Oh, but it's Wednesday. You can't do it because it's not Monday."
Just
so
wait till the 6th.
You'll get a couple extra days in there.
Yeah. It
was great.
It's the worst. It was great, but it's the worst. And I was pleasantly surprised. I got on the scale this morning. I've been avoiding it, and I got on the scale and I was like, all right. I earned that. That's. It's not a lot, but it's enough to be upsetting. But I did it to myself. I knew I did, and now it's time to turn it around. So.
Yep. But this was the same conversation we had last year. So
it's the same conversation I had last week. Come on. I have this conversation with myself every weekend. But Monday, back on the horse, buddy. Drink the coffee, do the fasting, hit the gym. And then by Tuesday, I'm like, I'm tired. I don't think I can do this.
By Tuesday,
anymore.
I usually fail by Monday afternoon.
Monday afternoon, exactly.
Done, out. And then I have to wait an entire week because, God forbid, I can't start on a Tuesday.
You can't start it on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Thursday. That just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. No, it doesn't.
But you just got to keep trying. So speaking of trying, our guest on this episode, Dr. Kelli Harding, she wrote a very interesting book, The Rabbit Effect, Live Longer, Happier, and Healthier with the Groundbreaking Science of Kindness. This is going to be difficult for me because I definitely have some room to improve in the kindness category. I'm a nice guy. Don't get me wrong. People who know me, they love me. That's just how it is. I know this about me.
What people are you talking
yeah,
to?
Exactly. No, I am generally a nice guy. But if I'm on my bike and you almost run me over, you're going to hear some colorful language. I'm going to think some colorful thoughts. I have a office environment where there are certain people that demand a lot of attention. They're very distracting. These things wear me down to the point where I start speaking my mind when it's very frustrated and angry. So these are some things that are going to be tough for me to try and let go of that anger and forgive people that almost kill me with their giant SUVs or who have distracted me for the 14th time in the last 6 minutes. But this is where I think it needs to start for me, is trying to not default to anger or frustration, but to default to kindness and compassion for the people that just didn't see me because they weren't looking or whatever. The bike thing is tough for me because that's where it all comes down to lack of consideration from other people when they're not aware of how their actions affect other people. And we're all guilty of it. When you're driving your car, you sort of become in your own universe and everyone around you is the enemy or it's your obstacle or whatever. So I get it. But as a bicyclist who is almost hit, several times a day, it gets really frustrating and really wears me down. So it's hard to have compassion for them in their situation because all I care about is not dying on my way to work.
Right.
So those are like the two key places where I need to start, is just letting go of the anger and being okay with other people are living their lives and I just happen to be in their way, or they happen to have gotten in my way this time. But for more on the science of how this works and how really just being kind or accepting the kindness of others can physically, dramatically change your life. We talked to Dr. Kelli Harding, the author of The Rabbit Effect, and we had to start with the obvious question: what is the rabbit effect? I have to wonder, when you wrote this book, did you have any idea you would be talking so much about rabbits?
It is really funny because I didn't have much of a relationship with rabbits before the book, but I've really gotten to know a lot about them subsequently.
I would imagine.
It's funny because for a lot of people that maybe haven't read the book or just have heard the title, they assume it's about animals, which it's not. There is a story that's significant that I'll tell you about, but it just kind of cracks me up. So, I've ended up talking a lot more about animals than I realized too. But so the rabbit effect, the book gets its name from this study that was done back in the 1970s. And what I think is really cool about this study, Jeremy, is it was designed for a totally different purpose. But some of the coolest scientific findings that are out there, it was because some researchers were really paying attention to what was going on, and they figured out something completely awesome. So what it was is Dr. Robert Nerum, who is a really terrific basic science researcher, was looking at the relationship between cholesterol and heart health. And the way that was being studied in the 70s was, giving some basically genetically identical rabbits all the same high-fat diet. So, at the end of the study, they expected all the rabbits to, basically be teed up for a rabbit heart attack and stroke. But what they found was that one of the groups of rabbits had way better health outcomes than the other groups. And when I say way better, I mean 60% difference, heart health profile outcomes versus the other group. And they thought there was something wrong with the protocol. They double-checked it, and eventually they figured out that the protocol was fine, but the difference was that all those rabbits were being cared for by the same researcher. And it turns out she wasn't just feeding the rabbits. She was actually picking up the rabbits. She was petting the rabbits. She was basically giving them love and kindness. And so they repeated the experiment, and they got the exact same results again. And they published it in the very prestigious journal Science. And, when I heard about this study as a doctor, I was totally blown away because that's not the way that I imagined biology worked, and it's not the way that most people think about health. Most of us think about health in terms of diet and exercise and sleep and the occasional trip to the doctor. But, that study was the beginning of decades of research that showed our social world is actually our major impact when it comes to our health. Jeremy, here is the thing that as a physician just blew my mind. So we know that top-notch medical care, it's important for every single human being, but it probably only accounts for 10 to 20% of someone's overall health.
Yeah, that's stunning.
So you're probably wondering, it's stunning. So, I think the thing is, it's absolutely a critical 10 to 20%, but at the same time, we have to be asking, what else is happening here? So in the rabbit effect, I go through all the data in all these different areas that show our relationships really matter when it comes to our health. And we know that because of large-scale population studies, and we know that also because of increasing advances in biological science that shows actually things like our neuroimmune system play a big role in, how we're doing and how we're feeling. And it's just incredible because, what this means is that health isn't, just hanging out in hospitals and clinics. It's happening in our homes, every day with our day-to-day interactions. It's happening in our workplaces. It's happening in our schools. It's happening in our neighborhoods. It's happening in our broader community. And it's really coming down to how we're treating one another. And that's why, there's such a focus on kindness in the book, because we know that kindness buffers stress. We know that, kindness helps people live longer in all these different areas of our lives, and being kind to ourselves is also a big part of that. So, that's why it felt so urgent for me to write this book and to try to get the message out well beyond, I sort of inhabit the world of hospitals and clinics, but it felt like this is something, we need to be talking about, across the country in our homes and communities and all these different places. So thank you for doing exactly that.
Well, I mean, thank you for the book. It's very eye-opening because of numbers just like that. And I wanted to ask you about kindness, and I'm just curious, does it sort of work both ways? Does it help if I decide suddenly I'm going to take this on, I'm going to just try and be more kind to more people, am I going to get the physical benefit of that, or does it work the other way where you sort of need people to love and care for you to see those effects like the rabbits did?
Well, I think that's what's so lovely about kindness. And it's so easy because I think, everyone, it's so simple, but yet so hard, right? Like kindness is a practice and we all struggle with it, no matter who we are. But I think the thing to keep in mind is that, we've all experienced kindness, and it's easy to, like, we can even, take a second and think about somebody who's been kind to us. And, it's kind of like usually when you think about that person, whoever they are, you get like this nice warm feeling. And it's amazing because we now know that's having like a physiological response in your body. And what's really cool is, like for people who are listening, they can reach out to somebody like this afternoon that, and just send a note of thanks. And we know that gratitude is also really good for health. So when it comes to kindness, it's both the giving and the receiving. And it's interesting to me in particular because I think for people that have maybe struggled with physical illnesses, like you may end up getting a lot of kindness directed your way, but it's also really important for, every person to be offering and extending kindness and have opportunities to be kind to others. So just for an example, like we know there's data that, volunteers live longer, which is cool because that means it's not just benefiting, the group that's receiving the volunteering, but the volunteer themselves does better. And, that's pretty amazing, right? Like to look at that data and just think like, geez, like, it's free. It helps everyone. It's a win-win all around. So like we should all be doing this in whatever way we can.
Yeah, that's incredible. If I can, let's take it back into the doctor's office then, and how in a world, nation, I guess, that thrives on money and getting, patients in and out as quickly as possible and sending them away with pills. How do you turn the tide when that's the machine you're up against? If you go to your doctor and you can't quite figure out what it is, and we now know very little that's actually happening in the doctor's office maybe is contributing to our health. How do we convince insurance companies to cover the things that would expose us to more kindness, whether it's, therapy or, other forms of alternative medicine that maybe can open those doors and help people find that kindness to get better?
Well, so the big thing is we have to just mentally make the shift that health goes beyond healthcare. So, like taking that, like making that aha moment as a nation, as individuals and as a nation is big because, when it comes to medical care, I think we invest, it's like 95 cents out of every dollar goes towards healthcare itself. And when you look at sort of like population data around the world, we know we spend nearly twice as much GDP wise on healthcare compared to other places and other wealthy nations. And yet we have far lower returns on that investment. And part of it is because we're not investing in our social infrastructure, like all these other things, including our mental health. And, I think that's where the work you're doing is so critical. And for all the people listening, like, a big elephant in the room is that our mental health really matters when it comes to our physical health. And, when you look at sort of how mental health is covered in this country, and actually it's something I talk about a lot in The Rabbit Effect is, we often carve out even though there's this idea that, the mind is coming from the brain, we somehow carve out our mental health in this country. And it's often not reimbursed. It's, sort of like a side thing, like even for people who've maybe spent time in the hospital, it's often like a physically separate hospital from the rest of it. And we need to recognize, of course, like our mind and our body are connected, and we need to be addressing people in a way that addresses people, like the whole person, I think we now know, like statistics, that like loneliness is as significant a risk factor to health as, things like, smoking 15 cigarettes a day, or, even obesity, or drinking a lot of alcohol to excess, like even high blood pressure. It's amazing. But, usually your doctor will ask you those questions. And now we know that doctors also need to be asking, like, do you have someone that you're close to, even just one person that you can talk to when things are, rough? Do you have supports that you can reach out to when things aren't going your way? So it's not going to be all the doctor's responsibility. And that's actually the other reason I wrote The Rabbit Effect, is because for every single listener, we need to be thinking about how we can support the people in our lives better. And, that's our families, that's our neighbors, that's our coworkers. It's, it's supporting education. We know that education is actually a huge factor when it comes to health. There's a stat that also blows my mind. It's like, for every one life saved by biomedicine, education saves 8. And so just think about that for a moment, because we just talked about how we invest, in our health in this country, but we don't necessarily invest in education in the same way. But yet it's got this incredibly protective effect when it comes to our health and well-being.
When you talk about loneliness, that's something that really resonated with me, because as someone who has battled depression my entire life, that I think that is the strongest feeling when you're in the depths of it. No matter how many close friends you have, no matter I'm married, I have kids, I'm surrounded by people that assure me they love me and all of the things. But when times are their darkest, it is a desperately lonely feeling. And I don't know how to, other than to just share that that's how I feel in those times. I don't know what to share with someone who hears that and goes, yeah, me too, because it's also the hardest time to reach out and ask for help. It's the hardest time to pick up the phone and go, hey, when you said I could call you at 3 a.m, well, here I am. So I don't know. Maybe I'm reaching too far with this, but what would you say to someone who battles with that desperate, lonely feeling, and maybe offer some hope to overcome it?
Well, first of all, I want to just tell you, by you sharing your story, that takes so much courage. And, I think that's the really important thing, is just letting people know they're not alone in feeling that way. And there's great power in that. I think the thing is, we live in an age where you're seeing all this stuff on social media, and all you have to do is Google, why do I feel so, and see what comes up. It's like, why do I feel so lonely? Or why does everyone else, seem successful? Or, it's kind of amazing, like the fill in the blank. Or why do I feel so hopeless? Why do I feel so tired? Like all those things. Like, that's the thing. Like, Google probably knows better than anybody. It's like, that's what people are searching, because people feel alone, even though they're surrounded by all this technology, even though, you may have people in the house, you may have somebody in the same bed. Like, that's the amazing thing. We know that loneliness is both the quantity and quality of our relationships. And, I think it was Elvis Presley that said he felt lonely in a crowded room. Mm-hmm. And so, we have to be thinking about our relationships. And I think, the big service is to just kind of put it on the table and say, like, okay, like our relationships actually really matter. And ideally what we'll do is invest in our relationships across different areas of our life, so that when things do get rough, when the turbulence strikes, it's like we've got that safety net already in place. And so, but, the other thing is there's this thing called the loneliness loop, where, it's kind of like when you don't feel good or you don't feel connected to people, the last thing you want to go do is actually go hang out with people, right?
Yes.
So this tends to spiral out of control. And for people who work in mental health or who've experienced depression, like, they know what this is about, right? So the question is, like, how can you kind of break out of that? And, everyone's going to have to find something that works for them. But the big thing is just trying to figure out, like, ways that you can connect that make you feel good and connected to other things. And we also know from the studies that you want to try to do it in as many areas as possible. I guess there's the, like, little things in your day-to-day life that actually add up in a really impressive way. Like little things, like when you're at the store getting your coffee in the morning, like just like looking the person in the eye, or when you're at the grocery store, the cashier. Like I feel like we're all looking at like the card machine now. We're not even like making eye contact with the person who's like giving us, our receipt, or chatting with the person in line behind you. Also things like, taking a class, if there's something you're interested in, like just sign yourself up. Like all you have to do is take one step. And I think, can feel so overwhelming when you're stuck in that loneliness loop. But whatever you can do to kind of take one step to get you out of it, there's a lot of power in action and reaching out. And, not everybody you reach out to is going to respond, but some people you'll be surprised. Like the more you do, the better you feel oftentimes. And, we've seen that time and time again. That being said, also for people who are listening who maybe aren't feeling lonely, think about reaching out to somebody who you feel may need an extra, time to hang out or chat, or, even just sending someone a note to say you're thinking about them. You never know what's going on in that person's life. So it may be just the thing they need to hear.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you for some takeaways, but I think you've kind of given them to us in the form of just trying to be there for some. I guess I'll just ask: is there anything else important here that we didn't touch on that you want to make sure people know about?
Oh my gosh! So I mean, like I said in the book, The Rabbit Effect, I cover a lot of ground, and there are like hundreds of ideas. In fact, every chapter I talk about a different area of our health, and then also give a toolkit with suggestions and ideas, because I think, there's a practical aspect to this, and it really comes down to our day-to-day lives and thinking about, how we can treat each other. And, I kind of joke you could probably like throw out a lot of our rules and just rewrite them as be kind, and just think about in the tiny choices of your life, like what can you do to add a little kindness to other people and yourself. And again, it's like it's so much easier often to be kinder to others than to ourselves, but think about what that might involve. Oh, there's one other thing I do want to add, and I think sometimes kindness gets a bad rap as like being like a pushover, but I think that the reality is that kindness takes a lot of courage. And actually, like exactly, Jeremy, the work you're doing with the show, it's like that takes a lot of courage to be kind and show people that you can have compassion and talk about emotions and that this stuff matters. So just to keep that in mind. And the other thing is, like, obviously a big part of kindness is also navigating conflict in a way that doesn't demean the other people involved. Like, so when conflict comes up, like, how do you focus on the problem and retain the dignity of all parties involved? And, that's not something most of us have any training in. Like, most of us took like a math class or a reading class in school, but very few of us took like a conflict resolution class, even though we probably deal with conflict like a lot more than advanced geometry at this point.
Right. Not me. I run like hell. If there's a conflict, I'm out.
Right. I think the stats are kind of startling, especially kids. For listeners that have kids, it's like, I think there's like on average like 8. I have 3 boys, so I see like way more conflict than you can imagine. But it's like, I think the average family has like 8 conflicts a day or something. It's like, like we need to know how to navigate that in a way. And we also need to realize that we're better at being kind when we take care of ourselves. So that means like getting a good night's sleep, doing the exercise, thinking about our bodies, like creating some healthy boundaries, all that stuff matters. So anyway, thank you for the work you're doing and for highlighting the importance of mental health and physical health and just, helping us all feel a little bit less alone.
Well, and thank you for a very approachable book that I think a lot of people will find a lot of value in the stories that you share, and just some of the statistics you shared here. There's a lot more in here that you'll continually pick up your jaw and just go, I can't believe that we've got it so backwards, and then we all wonder why we're all sick and exhausted and tired all the time.
Oh my gosh, right? Because that's the other thing is like, for a lot of people, this makes intuitive sense, but it's really cool to know that there's actually decades of data. I mean, this isn't a new finding, a lot of it, but the thing is people just don't know about it. So, I think that's where I was really hoping to like get a national conversation going that, we need to treat each other with kindness.
Definitely. Thank you so much for your time and for the book and for the very kind things you said about me and our show. I really appreciate the chance to chat with you.
Oh, absolutely. Even talking with you, I can tell you really make a difference for a lot of people.
All right, our guest again, Dr. Kelli Harding. The book is The Rabbit Effect, Live Longer, Happier, and Healthier with the Groundbreaking Science of Kindness. You can get that through our website, thefitmess.com. Some of the statistics she mentioned about how, basically 10% of healthcare is, what happens in the doctor's office just blew me away when you consider that the social impact of, who we interact with in our daily lives, whether it's home, work, the general public, whatever. That was mind-boggling to me. I had no idea. I mean, I knew it was important, but I had no idea that it's that significant to your well-being.
Yeah, and I think that really it lines up with all the other people that we've been talking to on the show. I mean, there is this consistent trend of the mind is able to do so much for the body, and hearing that 90% of it can be up in the mind. It's not as surprising now as it would have been a year ago. I think a year ago, I probably would have said something to the effect of, that's BS. But I think I'm on the other side, and it really is fascinating that, your mental state can really have that much of an impact on your body.
Well, and even just the social connection. Again, it goes back to one of our earlier conversations in the existence of this show with Johan Hari, and talking about the connections you have with other people and how vital those are to keeping you healthy and keeping you sane, especially when it's, you're in a mental health crisis. Like having that safety net of people that care about you and knowing how to use it. That's, as I mentioned, that's something I still struggle with when you're in your darkest of moments. The last thing you want to do is pick up the phone and go, "Hey, I'm hurting. Can you help me?" Because it's right. It's just a dark and lonely place, and it's hard to climb out.
Yep, but you really do need someone to be able to contact, and it is really critical. Yeah, for sure.
Anything else, Zach? What am I forgetting? Anything? We got it all?
We got a challenge we got to talk about.
Oh, a challenge. Challenge. Okay. Well, we've talked a lot about resolutions. Should we just challenge each other to try and hold to those for as long as possible?
Well, I think we should. I feel like we should redefine it, because I can't stand the New Year's resolution. Mm-hmm. I think that the small goals that I've decided to implement in my life are things that I want to be around for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. And, New Year's resolution always screams to me that it's, I'll do it for 2020. Right. And then after that, I'm out. So
it's almost an automatic out by being something that you're just going to try to do. You basically are giving yourself the out that it's okay to quit.
Yeah. So I would want to challenge you for our first challenge of 2020, and let's get really high level and almost meta on this, that we can and there's no way to measure it, but I'll challenge you to think about, rather than thinking about a New Year's resolution, think about a life resolution. Mm-hmm. Something that's going to stick with you forever, and that you're going to make a permanent part of your life, that when you slide into the grave, it's going to go with you.
Wow, that's dark.
No way. It's not dark. Just it'll be with you forever.
And ultimately, like I said, being kind, trying to connect more with others. That's sort of where my intention is set, and that will obviously pay dividends well beyond 2020 if I can actually do it and actually stick with it. So that's where I'll aim. That's what we'll try and work on.
Well, you're gonna have to stop being such a jerk.
That's true. That's the hard part. I don't know if I can let that go. Well, that's. I think that's going to do it for our first episode of the 2020 campaign. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with a new episode. We have a lot of really great guests lined up coming up in the next few months, but we're also going to be doing some more episodes, just Zach and I. So we'll kind of share a little bit more about our own journeys and the things that we're actually doing from a day-to-day basis to improve our overall wellness inside and out. So. I hope you'll join us for those. You can subscribe to the show through Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. All the links are available on our website. Also, I do quickly want to mention that a friend of the show, someone who has introduced this show for, I believe, its entire existence, a guy named Pete Combs, was a friend of mine and a colleague, and he sadly passed away shortly before Christmas. And so I just want to acknowledge that he was a big supporter and a big believer in this show. And so I just want to send some condolences to his lovely wife and family, and the just hundreds of people that he affected in his career and his lifetime. And thanks to him for being there for us. But with that, I think we're going to wrap things up and be back in a couple of weeks. You can find more on us at thefitmess.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. And we will see you next time at thefitmess.com.
See you, everyone.
We know this podcast is amazing and does not seem to lack anything, but we do need a legal disclaimer. Jeremy and Zach are not doctors. They do not play them on the internet, and even if they did play them on the internet, they would be really bad at it. Please consult your physician prior to implementing any changes that you heard on this podcast. The listener assumes that Jeremy and Zach do not know what they are talking about, and that you will do your own research on the topics talked about on this podcast.